Hi everybody, I just got my box of Justice books today. I'm super happy. They are beautiful, a little glossy, you can see the sheen. I'm super excited, and in honor of that, I thought it might be fun to read the prologue to you myself. So here goes. Justice. Wind groans at my window pane. The hollow sound slithers up my neck. I pull my blanket over my head and try to go back to sleep. Bleak weather carries warnings, so I'm not surprised when my phone rings in the dark hours of the morning. Hello? The covers muffle my wary voice. Peta is dead. Instantly I sit up and grip the phone to my ear, ignoring the cold. What? They found him. Someone beat him to death. The sentence ends in a bleak wail. Who? I asked, though I already know. Peta. His name is sung on a moan of grief. I say nothing. My mind tries on images of the teenage boy broken and suffering. I quickly discard them. What happened? When? I reach for my blanket robe at the end of my bed. All I know is that he's dead. His body is a bloody mess. Hikers found him down by the hot springs in Mammoth. A sob echoes through the phone and into my soul. They didn't think it was human. One of his arms is broken, and many of his ribs. His skull, they smashed it. I try to breathe and wait for the crying on the phone to soften. Are you with him now? At the morgue, I squeezed my eyes shut, not wanting to imagine what it would be like to identify the body of someone you love. Who would do such a thing? The police have brought in 3 senior boys from Peta's high school for questioning. Is it the same kids who've been picking on him for the past year? Ever since he moved in with his grandfather. The principal should have done something. He turned a blind eye. A hot, sticky sense of injustice ignites in my belly. This is a hate crime. There's no doubt about that. This has to stop. My retort is sharp. It won't. It will. It's in the hands of the court now. We'll see how well the court handles this. I don't have a lot of faith. If Peta isn't given justice, we'll take it. 1 month later. All rise. The court bailiff's voice bounces off plaster walls and goosebumps race across the surface of my skin. The Honorable Judge William Hughes presiding. Everyone in the courtroom stands and waits for the man. Judge Hughes, though a minor federal judge, is a major personality. He sweeps in through the door that leads to the courtroom from his chambers. His black robe flares out as he rounds the corner to mount 2 steps to his bench. When he drops himself onto it, the leather desk chair releases a sigh, and the spectators sit along with him. Bailiff, bring in the jury. My hands are cold as I lace my fingers together and stare at the entrance. The bailiff nods at the judge and opens the door at the side of the room. A mix of 7 men and 5 women file in, taking their seats in the jury box. Hughes smiles at them benevolently. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. Thank you for being here again today to hear the closing arguments in this case. His gaze pans to the bailiff. Court will come to order in the matter of the State of Wyoming versus Mason Clark, James Martin, and Andrew Wright on charges of first-degree murder. After the proclamation, the bailiff moves to his position beside the juror's door. I've been waiting for this day for so long, I had begun to think it would never happen. My heart pounds like a gavel. Judge Hughes peers down from the bench. Mr. Getz, is the government prepared to give closing arguments? Yes, Your Honor. Donald Getz, the federal prosecutor, spreads his hands over a manila file folder, but rises to his feet without it. He moves around the wooden table, nodding to the judge on his way. Thank you, Your Honor. He stands before the jurors, looking at each one in the eye. Getz is a handsome man, distinguished, but with a boyish charm that will hopefully sway some of the female jurors, even if the facts of his case don't. Before he addresses the 12, the prosecuting attorney looks down at his polished wingtips. He releases a breath, raises his face to the panel, and in a warm, unwavering baritone, he begins. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, once again for your presence here and your careful attention in this trial. In the beginning, Judge Hughes instructed you on the law. He clarified that any comment or argument made by either counsel are not part of the actual evidence. Evidence is what you have heard from the witnesses, along with various documents and exhibits that were presented. You are not to consider my statements, Getz sweeps his hand in a wide gesture that includes the defense attorney, or any of what Mr. Ward has told you, but rather purely what the witnesses have said in their testimony and what the evidence shows you. Then, using your good judgment and a common sense, you are to interpret the testimony and determine the truth therein. The path to justice is entirely for you to determine. The judge also discussed the difference between direct and circumstantial evidence. When someone sees something happen, that is direct evidence. If a man sees another man fire a gun and kill someone, that is direct evidence. Circumstantial evidence is inferred from a set of known facts. For example, if a man hears a gunshot and runs into the room to see a corpse lying on the floor and another man standing over the body holding a smoking gun in his hand, it would be reasonable to infer that the man with the gun shot the dead man on the floor. If you add to that knowledge that the day before the man with the gun had threatened to kill the dead man, you now have more evidence to convince you of his guilt. I noticed the eyes of two of the jurors stray to the defense table where 3 16-year-old boys who murdered Peta sit with their attorney. My soul stretches out to theirs, willing the jurors to recognize the boys' smug wickedness. Getz offers his listeners an understanding grin. We've all seen courtroom dramas on TV, and it is common to believe that criminals cannot be convicted on circumstantial evidence. But that is a falsehood. Most criminal convictions are based on circumstantial evidence, as long as there is enough of it to meet the burden of proof, which I believe I have presented to you over the duration of this trial. The soft clicking of the stenotype machine whirs to keep pace with the prosecutor's speech, and I concentrate on the sound, silently imploring the jury to agree with the prosecutor. Let me point out the type of inferences you could make during this trial. Getz holds up his finger. We have heard testimony that students frequently saw these 3 white defendants bullying the deceased Peta Kanoska, a young man of Native American Crow descent, at their school, pushing him and taunting him with racial slurs. And the end result of this bigoted behavior was murder. Murder in the form of racially motivated hate crime. Getz clenches his jaw and shakes his head. An eyewitness saw these same 3 boys forcing Peta into the trunk of Mason Clark's car, the same car in which a red bead that likely came off a beaded scabbard belonging to Peta and a packet of methamphetamines were found by forensic investigators. Objection, Alan Ward, attorney for the defense, interrupted. The boy in the trunk was never positively identified as Peta Kanoska, and the methamphetamines have no bearing on this case. Sustained. Getz nodded and continued. That same night, Peta's grandfather, with whom the boy lived, reported his grandson missing. 1 week later, Peta's brutalized body was found by hikers near Mammoth Hot Springs. And finally, another student witnessed these same boys. Getz pointed to the defendants, their parents crowding the long bench behind them, showing off the beaded scabbard that Peta was known to carry with him, a symbol of his proud Native heritage. The prosecutor pauses, and the silence in the room presses down on my shoulders. His arguments are clear, and I'm certain they'll lead to a conviction. They must. The defense will claim that all of this evidence is coincidental, that there's no proof of murder. But I say that the only reasonable inference you can make from these facts is that these 3 young men, James Martin, Mason Clark, and Andrew Wright, with premeditated thought and malicious intent to kill, abducted the victim, Peta Kanoska, a Native American boy, viciously beat him to death, and left his body to rot in the wilderness of Wyoming. I squeeze my eyes tight against the mental image Getz paints, and my stomach roils. He grips the railing of the jury box with both hands and leans forward. I appeal to your sense of righteousness. You must find all three of these boys guilty of first-degree murder in an obvious racial hate-motivated crime. This disgusting and violent bigotry must be punished. The attorney pulls in a long breath and studies the face of each juror. I am confident you will do the right thing and bring justice to young Peta Kanoska. He turns to the judge. Thank you, Your Honor. Hughes nods and waits for the prosecutor to return to his seat before addressing the defense. Mr. Ward, are you ready with the final arguments for the defense? The barrel-chested defense attorney, Alan Ward, glances back at the boys' fathers, sitting on the other side of the bar, and smiles confidently. Both the curious and the indignant fill the courtroom benches. The dead boy's grandfather sits alone in the last row of the gallery near the door, as stoic as the chiefs of old. Yes, Your Honor, if it pleases the court. Ward places a beefy hand on the shoulder of the young defendant sitting next to him and gives the boy a pat. The three teens all have fresh haircuts and are wearing suits with ties, each doing his best to look innocent. None of them fool me. Ward ambles toward the jury with a good old boy saunter. He looks certain that the jury will side with his defendants, whom he has craftily portrayed as hard-working local ranch boys. One of their own. Good morning, folks. I'd like to echo Mr. Getz's appreciation for the kind generosity of time and attention you've given to hear the discussion of this trial. He smiles at the jurors, and 10 out of 12 smile back. My stomach twists tighter. You have all heard Judge Hughes speak about the spectacular form of justice system we are fortunate to have in this blessed country. One unlike any other in the whole world. One where every accused person is presumed innocent unless proven otherwise beyond any and all reasonable doubt. Proven, ladies and gentlemen. That is a strong word and one you must hold fast to in your assessment of this case. We've heard quite a few stories over the past several days, but no hard facts that could possibly lead any thinking person to conclude that the poor dead boy found here in Wyoming met his fate at the hands of these three fine young men from Montana. Now, the prosecution, since they have no solid case, would like you to believe that if you string together all his snippets of circumstantial incidents, that you should come to the weak supposition that these boys were somehow involved. But let's go through those glimpses one more time together. We've heard about a few afternoons when these boys were seen teasing Peta at school. Now, none of us like the idea of this kind of schoolyard banter, but as the saying goes, boys will be boys. Ward's full lips purse in humor. A 911 caller claimed he saw the boys helping another dark-haired boy into the trunk of a car, but when questioned, the caller couldn't swear that the boy he saw was absolutely Peta Kanoska. The witness watched the incident from almost a full city block away and couldn't possibly have had a clear view of the teenage shenanigans. The attorney turned and smiled indulgently at the defendants. It was pure coincidence that Peta Kanoska didn't return to his grandfather's home that same night. Now there's the question of the red bead discovered in the trunk of Mason Clark's car. The bead could have come from any one of 100 or more places, and when the FBI searched the boys' homes and school lockers, no native knife nor beaded scabbard were located. They found no other loose beads either, for that matter. Next, a young girl believes she saw the boys at the movie theater looking at something that resembled a scabbard several days after Peta went missing, and yet this item has not been recovered or entered into evidence, nor was anything like it found by federal investigators. Ladies and gentlemen, we all feel horrible about what happened to that young man. But wouldn't you rather find the true killer than blame his death on these three innocent boys and effectively allow the actual murderer to go free? Dropping his chin, Ward shakes his head as though the thought greatly disturbs him. He lets out a deep sigh and continues. The prosecution has the burden of proving his case to you beyond a reasonable doubt. He has not done so. All Mr. Getz and his team have been able to do is parade a handful of witnesses before you with unconnected, unprovable tales of boys who admittedly should be reprimanded, even disciplined, but there is no conceivable way that you can, in any good conscience, find them guilty of first-degree murder. I have every confidence that you agree with me on that point. I ask you, therefore, to do the just thing and find these boys not guilty. A trickle of sweat skitters down my spine. The certainty in his voice and his wide grin as he turns back to the defense table cause my blood to simmer. How dare he reduce what Peta went through on a daily basis to childish hijinks? I glance at the jury to see if I can guess their thoughts before the judge sends them out to deliberate. But I can't read anyone's intent as they all turn their eyes to Hughes and wait his direction. My ears are hot and ringing. I barely hear the judge give his charge to the jury for their deliberation of the case. He reminds them of the standard of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. You are required to adhere to the written law in making your decision, regardless of what you believe the law is or ought to be. The judge sits back in his chair and says, "You are excused to deliberate this case." I'll stop there. There's about 3 more pages in the prologue. I hope that you enjoyed the reading. Excuse my few errors. And I hope that you'll pick up this book and continue the story for yourselves. Again, here's Justice, and it's very beautiful. Shiny new cover. I'm trying not to get the glare. There you go. All right. Hey, have a great evening and take care. Good night.